Ghent is one of Belgium's most popular cities among tourists. It is often described as a hidden gem of Europe, as it has preserved one of the largest historic city centers on the continent. There are no reconstructions here, but real history. The old Gravensteen castle right in the heart of the city, the picturesque quays of Graslei and Korenlei, magnificent Gothic cathedrals, and historic guild houses. Ghent is also home to one of the largest universities in Europe. This fills the city with young people, creative cafes, concept bars, and art spaces. Ghent feels more authentic than many other tourist cities. Here, the Middle Ages blend seamlessly into modern life.
For art lovers, Ghent is a true place of pilgrimage, home to works of world-class importance. In St. Bavo's Cathedral, you can find the Ghent altarpiece, The Adoration of the Mystic Lamb, by the Van Eyck brothers. This masterpiece is considered one of the most significant and most frequently stolen artworks in history, and it leaves viewers with a powerful, lasting impression.
Ghent is a city of light. It is famous for its carefully designed lighting concept. After nightfall, thousands of lanterns and spotlights illuminate the medieval buildings and canals, transforming the city into a fairy tale. Ghent has even received several international awards for its urban lighting design.
From Brussels to Ghent-Sint-Pieters station, the train journey takes about 40 minutes. The station is called Ghent-Sint-Pieters, not because it is connected to a particular saint or religious institution, but after the area in which it is located. When the railway network was developed in the 19th and 20th centuries, stations were often named after geographical reference points or city districts. Originally, a small stop on the Ghent to Ostend line also bore the name Ghent-Sint-Pieters, after the area where a medieval abbey and St. Peter's Square were located.
As the train slowly pulls into Ghent-Sint-Pieters, you have the feeling that you are not simply arriving at a railway station, but at the city's ceremonial gates. The building welcomes visitors with a tall tower, almost like a medieval belfry. A belfry is a civic watchtower and bell tower, one of the most important symbols of the medieval cities of Flanders and northern France. The station tower seems to say, "Welcome to Flanders, where history is part of everyday life." This effect was deliberately planned. The station was built for the 1913 World's Fair, which was held in Ghent. The architect, Louis Cloquet, wanted visitors to sense the character of Ghent immediately. Proud, ancient, and a little fairy tale-like.
From the outside, the building looks as if it were assembled from different eras. Red brick stands next to pale natural stone, neo-Gothic arches alongside motifs of the Flemish Renaissance. This is not a random mixture, but a consciously designed eclecticism that was popular in Belgium in the early 20th century. The station seems to say, "We remember the past, but we look confidently toward the future." Once inside, the city continues its narrative. The main hall is decorated with panels and murals depicting views of Flemish cities. As travelers hurry to their trains, the walls quietly recall medieval markets, towers, and canals. Even the simple act of waiting becomes a small excursion. And beneath the glass and metal canopies of the platforms, one can feel the breath of the industrial age, the era that brought the railways and connected old cities with the new world. Today, these structures have been renovated and complemented by modern solutions, yet the historical rhythm of the space has been carefully preserved.
That is precisely why Ghent-Sint-Pieters is more than just a transport hub. It is a place where the journey through Ghent begins even before you enter the city, and where architecture gently and intriguingly introduces you to its history. The sculpture The Encounter by the sculptor Paul van Giesechem is located on Maria Hendrikaplein near the station. The male and female figures symbolize the coming together of the rivers Scheldt and Leie in this city.
To reach the Old Town with its main sites, it is best to take the tram to the Vogelmarkt stop. It takes about 15 minutes. From platform number 2 near the station, take tram line 1 in the direction of Ghent-Sint-Pieters and ride for 13 minutes to the Ghent-Vogelmarkt stop. Alternatively, from platform number 20, you can take tram line 3 in the direction of Ghent-Brugge, Moscow, and also travel for 13 minutes to the Ghent-Vogelmarkt stop.
From the Ghent-Vogelmarkt stop, we continue on foot to the Herald de Gravensteen, the castle of Herald the Devil. On the way to Sint-Veerleplein, we pass the monument to Lieven Bauwens. Lieven Bauwens was a significant figure in Belgian industrial history of the 18th and 19th centuries. He played a key role in the industrialization of Ghent, particularly through the introduction of the mule jenny, an advanced mechanical spinning machine that he secretly brought from England. This act is considered a decisive step in the development of the textile industry in Flanders. The statue was created by the sculptor Constant de Vreese and unveiled in 1885. Bauwens is depicted in a dignified pose, symbolizing his foresight and his leading role in industrial progress. Surrounding the monument are symbolic figures representing labor and industry, underscoring his contribution to the economic rise of Ghent and Belgium.
Ghent is a city that seems made for walking and storytelling. The name Ghent has a very ancient, water-related origin, just like the city itself. It is believed to derive from the Celtic word ganda, meaning confluence of rivers. And this fits perfectly. Ghent emerged exactly where the rivers Lyre and Scheldt meet. For people in antiquity, such places were considered magical, ideal for trade, protection, and life. In the early Middle Ages, an abbey was founded here, around which a trading settlement quickly grew. By the 13th century, Ghent had developed into one of the largest and wealthiest cities in Europe, thanks to cloth production. The castle of Herald the Devil once protected the harbour of Portus Ganda.
This Gothic fortress was built in the 13th century by the feudal knight Gérard Villain, known as Gérard the Devil, and was named after him. The nickname the Devil does not mean that he was evil or actually associated with the devil. It most likely arose because of his dark skin and hair, which at the time were considered unusual and could be perceived as uncanny by local standards. A plaque beside the building reads, "Threatening, massive, even a little eerie, yet the devil never lived here." Over the centuries, the castle has served as a knight's residence, a monastery, a place of refuge, a bishop's seminary, a prison, and a state archive. Above all, however, this magnificent structure holds unique value as an example of Europe's vivid and fascinating Gothic architecture. It was the first stone building in the city. Since the castle's crypt covers an area of about 560 square meters, it is considered the largest of its kind in Belgium.
The monument to the Van Eyck brothers is one of Ghent's best-known sculptural groups. It is dedicated to the two great Flemish painters of the 15th century, Hubert van Eyck and Jan van Eyck, the creators of the famous Ghent altarpiece. The monument stands beside St. Bavo's Cathedral, Sint-Bav's Cathedral, practically on the very spot where the Ghent altarpiece was once located, and where it can still be seen today. The sculptural group is arranged so that the brothers seem symbolically present with their masterpiece. It is a bronze multi-figure composition. At the center sit the two masters, Jan and Hubert van Eyck. On either side are figures representing art lovers, members of society, students, contemporaries, and all those who were inspired by their work. The monument has a distinctly theatrical quality. The figures appear drawn toward the artists, to discuss, to point, to admire, creating the impression of a vivid, living scene.
The composition is especially striking against the backdrop of the Gothic architecture of St. Bavo's Cathedral. The monument was erected in 1913 by the young Ghent sculptor Geo Verbank in collaboration with the architect Valentin Warwick. The city commissioned the statue on the occasion of the World's Fair held that year. It was a time when national self-confidence and the cultural heritage of Flanders were particularly emphasized in Belgium, and the Van Eycks were regarded as one of the most important historical calling cards. Their most significant contribution to world art is closely linked to Ghent. The Ghent altarpiece, the Adoration of the Mystic Lamb, completed in 1432 and now considered a key work of early Netherlandish painting. If you stand in front of the monument and look between the heads of Jan and Hubert, a unique view opens up toward the wide chapel of St. Bavo's Cathedral, where the Ghent altarpiece was once located.
St. Bavo Square is one of the most important and beautiful squares in Ghent, essentially the heart of the old town. Both tourists and locals love it for its special atmosphere, the monumental buildings that surround it, and the fact that almost all major sites can be reached from here within just a few minutes. The square lies in Ghent's historic centre, in the area where the city was, in a sense, born, not far from the confluence of the Scheldt and the Leie. One of the central ideas of this square is that it brings together the symbols of the three forces on which the medieval city was founded: the church, St. Bavo's Cathedral, the citizens and civic power, the Belfry of Ghent, and intellect and culture, the Royal Dutch Theatre.
On the square, we see the monument to Jan Frans Willems, a very important figure for Flemish culture and the language movement. Jan Frans Willems was a Flemish writer, poet, philologist, and social activist. He is often called the father of the Flemish movement, a man who, in the 19th century, actively advocated for the Dutch, Flemish, language and culture in Belgium, where French influence was very strong at the time. The monument was unveiled in 1899. It consists of a massive granite pedestal with a medallion portrait of Willems. Above it rises a white marble allegorical group connected to the idea of the awakening of Flanders. A young man, symbolizing the Flemish movement, appears to awaken and liberate a young woman who personifies Flanders.
The Royal Dutch Theatre forms a visual counterbalance to the cathedral. The theatre was built between 1897 and 1899 on the site of the former Regnessestraat, in an eclectic style dominated by Renaissance elements, based on a design by the architect Edmond de Vigne.
The main dominant feature of the square is the immense Gothic cathedral, one of the most important in Belgium. Churches have stood on this site since the 10th century. St. Bavo's Cathedral is one of Ghent's key vertical landmarks and a very precise example of how a medieval city spoke about itself through architecture. The cathedral is not only a religious space, but also a public statement. It functions simultaneously as a symbol of faith, a representation of the city, and a cultural focal point. The cathedral's exterior did not take shape within just a few decades. It was formed over centuries, which is why the facade can be read like a historical montage, layered with elements from different periods. The artistic core principle, however, is Gothic. This is easily recognized in the strong verticality, the rhythmic articulation, the clear tectonic structure, and the overall skeletal logic. The architecture does not conceal its construction, but turns it into an aesthetic in its own right.
Take a close look. The facade does not strive for theatrical effect. This is not Baroque, but a classic example of Brabantine Gothic. What matters here are scale, proportions, the repetition of verticals, and a clear hierarchy of forms, from the heavier, more stable base to the lighter, more airy upper sections. The building seems to want to lift itself off the ground. The facade materials consist of light-colored Tournai stone and brick. Ghent did not have rich marble deposits, so architects played with the texture of the stone and the rhythm of the buttresses, massive vertical projections on the exterior of the building that reinforce the load-bearing walls. The darkening of the stone, along with traces of rain and wind, becomes part of the visual impression. As a result, the cathedral does not appear as an object that has simply been preserved, but as one that continues to live within the urban space. The Gothic facade defines vertical movement, rhythm, and distance. What we see is not just a sacred building, but an idea. How a city and an era transformed faith, power, and order into architecture.
As soon as one steps through the main entrance, the strong contrast becomes apparent between the massive early Gothic altar made of blue stone and the nave built of sandstone and brick in varying colors. The choir is designed in the style of classical French Gothic and displays the three typical levels: the arcade of piers, the triforium, and the clear-story windows. The word triforium comes from Latin and can be translated as passage or door. In the semi-dark Romanesque basilicas, the upper galleries were originally created so that light could enter the side aisles through their openings. As Gothic architecture developed further, triforia gradually lost their functional role, became narrower, and eventually turned into a purely decorative element, the so-called blind arcades. Such a triforium is usually located on the second level of the central nave in Gothic or Romanesque churches. Celt Gothic is expressed in this building through the decorated perforated triforium, the capitals, and the red brick vaults. Although the nave extends over only 4 bays, it nevertheless conveys a sense of spaciousness. Sandstone and brick are used unevenly, and the carefully crafted columns are particularly striking.
Right in the central nave, the monumental pulpit immediately captures the attention of anyone entering. It was carved in 1745 by the Ghent sculptor Laurent Delvaux from white Italian marble and Danish oak. The contrast between the cool white of the marble and the warm, dark oak creates a harmonious unity in this masterpiece. The central sculptural group represents an allegory of the triumph of truth over falsehood. At the foot of the Tree of Life stands Time, embodied by the old winged man Kronos. He symbolizes all of humanity. Awakened by the sound of the angel's trumpet, he lifts the veil from his head and gazes upon truth in the form of a young girl. She shows him the words of the Apostle Paul: "Awake, thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light."
On the other side of the staircase, 2 elegant statues in white marble, winding gracefully around the tree, invite people to listen to the word of the Lord. On the front of the pulpit are medallions depicting the Nativity of Christ, the conversion of St. Paul, and the conversion of St. Bavo, while on the back there is a portrait of Bishop Trieste, who financed this masterpiece. Above them, 2 angels are shown raising the cross, while a third struggles with a serpent over the fruit of the tree. The grandeur of the concept, the elegance of the carving, the beauty of the sculpture, the union of grace in the figure of the young girl and strength in the figure of Kronos, and the harmony of the entire composition, all of this makes the pulpit a masterpiece of Flemish Rococo art in Belgium.
On either side of the altar steps stand life-size statues of St. Peter and St. Paul, carved from white Carrara marble. In the niches on the front are figures representing hope and charity. Above the high altar hangs a large baldachin supported by 4 massive columns, which also serves as the base for the central sculptural group, the apotheosis of Saint Bavo. The saint is dressed in the garments of a Roman warrior and stands on a throne of clouds borne by angels. He lifts his gaze toward heaven, spreads his arms, and seems to utter his final words, which can be read on the upper part of the baldachin. "I have fought for the cross, and now I behold the glory of the cross." Two allegorical figures, faith and penance, the principal virtues of St. Bavo, look down from the baldachin.
On both sides of the altar, one can see magnificently adorned tombs of the bishops of Ghent. From a perspective point of view, the high altar forms the central motif of this marble symphony. What is remarkable is how harmoniously it blends into the Gothic style of the surrounding interior. Moreover, the altar unites architecture and sculpture into a single, powerful, and impressive overall composition.
Yet the heart of the cathedral is the mystic lamb altarpiece, the altar of the Van Eyck brothers. Imagine the year 1432. The world still lives by medieval standards, and then Jan and Hubert van Eyck appear. The Ghent altarpiece is, in a sense, the high resolution of the 15th century. When you look at it, you understand that this is where oil painting was born in the form we know today. It is not merely a famous work of art, but one of those masterpieces with which a new era of European painting effectively begins, the Northern Renaissance. The altarpiece is conceived as a large, hinged polyptych. It can be closed and opened, and depending on its state, the viewer sees different scenes. It is therefore not a single painting, but a complete visual system, almost like a theatrical staging. Its narrative unites the central Christian idea of redemption. At the center of the composition stands the mystic lamb as a symbol of Christ's sacrifice, and around it gathers a procession of saints, prophets, martyrs, and believers, virtually the entire world assembled around the source of salvation.
The entire altarpiece encompasses the representation of the redemptive mysteries of the Catholic faith, from the Annunciation and the Incarnation of Christ on the outer wings, to Christ's sacrificial death and the adoration of the Lamb on the inner panels. The outer wings belong to the closed, quiet state of the altarpiece. In this form, it remained on ordinary weekdays. On feast days, the altarpiece was opened, and viewers were then literally dazzled by a feast of color. Even after 600 years, we are still amazed by the freshness and depth of the colors, the exotic landscape of the paradisiacal garden, and the overwhelming precision of detail in the depictions.
What is decisive is not only the narrative, but above all, the way it is presented. The Van Eycks became masters of a new relationship with the visible world. Thanks to the technique of oil painting, they depict light and matter in a way few before them had achieved. Metal gleams, fabrics appear dense and heavy, gemstones seem to glow from within, and landscapes look astonishingly real. This is not mere decoration, but a new assertion that the world matters and deserves precise representation. That is precisely why the Ghent altarpiece is regarded as one of the key works that changed the course of art history. It reveals the moment when painting ceased to be only symbolic and became an instrument for a new way of seeing reality.
The Ghent altarpiece is a work of the highest artistic rank and attracts great interest, both from art lovers and from those with less noble intentions. In 1794, the adoration of the Lamb of God left St. Bavo's Cathedral for the first time, in part. French soldiers took the central panels to Paris. They returned to Ghent only in 1815, after the fall of Napoleon. This marked the beginning of a turbulent history. Over the centuries, the adoration of the Lamb of God has been stolen or removed from the cathedral 7 times. The altarpiece is considered one of the most frequently stolen works of art in history. Traces of these events are still visible today. In 1934, 2 side panels were stolen, only one of which was ever recovered. The panel of the Just Judges remains missing to this day. Currently, a copy is displayed in place of the original. In contemplating the Ghent altarpiece, we grasp the moment when painting ceases to be merely an illustration of religion and becomes an independent instrument of knowledge. Here, a new way of seeing emerges, a new ethics of vision. If the world is created by God, then it deserves to be depicted with precision.
Inside the cathedral hangs the painting The Conversion of St. Bavo by Peter Paul Rubens. It is a large altarpiece created specifically for the cathedral and has remained in St. Bavo's to this day, essentially the church's most important Rubens attraction. The work was conceived as a high altarpiece and is dedicated to St. Bavo, the patron saint of the cathedral. It is a striking example of Rubens's Baroque style, dynamic movement, powerful modeling of the human body, dramatic lighting, and the effect of a theatrical scene.
Opposite St. Bavo's Cathedral, on the square, we see the Ghent Belfry. The belfry is one of the most important landmarks of Ghent's historic city centre and a symbol of civic freedoms. Together with St. Bavo's Cathedral and St. Nicholas's Church, it forms the famous Three Towers of Ghent. A belfry, beffroi in French, belfort in Dutch, is a civic watchtower and bell tower and one of the most important symbols of the medieval cities of Flanders and northern France. The Ghent Belfry is about 91 meters high and is considered the tallest medieval belfry in Belgium. Construction began in 1313 and was completed toward the end of the 14th century. Today, it is part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, Belfries of Belgium and France.
In the Middle Ages, such bell towers, belfries, were not built merely for decoration. They were a sign of independence and the strength of municipal self-government. The city's privileges, charters defining its rights and freedoms, as well as other important documents, were kept here. The bells served as a warning and information system in cases of fire, attack, alarms, and major events. The tower also functioned as an observation point, and the tower clock regulated the rhythm of urban life. Thus, the belfry is not a church structure, but a civic, municipal form of bell tower. The tower is Gothic, severe and massive. Its most famous feature is the gilded dragon weather vane at the top, one of the symbols of Ghent. This motif became so iconic that it even inspired the name of the Belgian beer Gulden Draak, which translates as Golden Dragon.
Today, the tower is no longer just a historic monument, but also a tourist attraction, with exhibitions and access to the top. The ascent is usually done in a combined way. Part of the route is climbed by stairs, after which an elevator is available, which is very helpful. One important thing to note, the descent is often only via stairs, something to keep in mind if you are not fond of steps. Inside, each level features quite interesting exhibitions, such as the functioning mechanism of the carillon, a set of bells on which the melodies played by the belfry's bells are programmed. At the top, visitors are rewarded with viewing platforms offering an unforgettable panoramic view over the city.
On the other side of the belfry is a remarkable relief known as the Mammelokker, literally, the one who suckles at the breast, with a striking story behind it. It refers to the motif of Caritas Romana, Roman charity, also known as Caiman and Pero, from ancient Roman tradition. An old man named Caiman was awaiting execution in prison and had been condemned to death by starvation. The jailer allowed his daughter Pero to visit him, and out of compassion, she nourished her father with her own milk. This act so deeply impressed the authorities that the old man was ultimately pardoned.
Right next to it stands the old town hall of Ghent, one of the city's most unusual and atmospheric buildings, as it literally brings together two architectural worlds. Construction of the town hall began at the start of the 15th century and continued for almost 2 centuries, giving the building an almost two-faced appearance. The Gothic side, facing Hoogpoort, looks somber and strongly vertically oriented, adorned with turrets, arches, and stone figures, classic Flemish Gothic. The atmosphere here is unmistakably medieval.
The Renaissance side of the town hall, facing Korenmarkt, is symmetrical and light, with columns and decorative medallions. The influence of the Italian Renaissance is immediately apparent. This contrast makes the town hall unique. It feels as though two different buildings have been carefully stitched together. In the Middle Ages, Ghent was one of the richest cities in Europe, and the town hall served as a symbol of its independence and strength. The city council met here, European monarchs and envoys were received, and important political documents were signed.
The large modern building of the Stadshal, the city pavilion, is located at one of the most prominent spots in the city center, between the belfry and St. Nicholas's Church. Its space is used for various events and concerts. The basement houses a brewery, restrooms, changing rooms, and a bicycle parking area for around 200 bicycles. In August 2024, the city pavilion hosted an event in support of Ukraine, which is heroically resisting aggressive fascist Russia.
The fountain with kneeling youths is the most famous and successful sculpture by the Belgian sculptor George Minne. George Minne enjoyed international recognition within the circles of Art Nouveau and symbolism. The slender nude youths are a unique creation of Minne. These fragile, introverted figures are characteristic of the great delicacy and expressive power that the artist achieved in his sculptures.
Right here, next to St. Nicholas's Church, we see the old bell standing on a concrete pedestal. This bell is called Roland, named after the first great bell of the Ghent belfry. It cracked in 1914 and was later removed from the tower. After restoration, it now hangs in a specially designed support beside St. Nicholas's Church. During city festivals and public events, one often hears the song, the unofficial anthem of Ghent, the bell Roland. The song became popular in the 19th century because it perfectly reflected the local spirit, a love of freedom, independence, and self-confidence. In the lyrics, the bell speaks almost like a living being. It calls, warns, and rallies the people. The central message is simple and powerful. As long as Roland rings, Ghent is not defeated.
St. Nicholas's Church is a Roman Catholic church and one of the oldest and best-known churches in Ghent. It was built at the beginning of the 13th century and is considered an outstanding example of Scheldt Gothic, a style typical of the region along the River Scheldt. Together with the belfry and St. Bavo's Cathedral, it forms Ghent's famous skyline. St. Nicholas is the patron saint of merchants, sailors, and travellers. The church stands on the Korenmarkt, the former trading square. In the Middle Ages, this area was full of activity. Goods were traded, contracts were signed, and negotiations were conducted. St. Nicholas's Church was the spiritual centre of mercantile Ghent.
The church is built of grey-blue limestone and is distinguished by its central tower above the crossing, which once served as a landmark for sailors. The austere, restrained interior is adorned with stained glass windows and pointed arches that reflect early forms of Flemish Gothic. There is no demonstrative splendor here, rather a sense of calm and solidity, like that of a city that knows its own worth. Numerous chapels along the side aisles were added in the 14th and 15th centuries. Among the church's treasures is its organ, built by the renowned French organ builder Aristide Cavaillé-Coll.
At the church's main altar, there is a 17th century painting by the Flemish artist Nicolas de Lieven, entitled The Consecration of St. Nicholas, Bishop of Myra. It depicts the appointment of St. Nicholas, Nicholas of Myra, as bishop, an important episode in the life of the church's patron saint and one of the most venerated saints in Christianity. The painting is executed in a dynamic and emotional style that was highly appreciated by contemporaries, even by artists such as Rubens. In its composition and spirit, the work is closer to Baroque painting than to the medieval Gothic architecture of the church itself. For medieval communities, the high altar was not merely decorative, but a visual affirmation of the spiritual mission of the church. In St. Nicholas's church, that mission is embodied by St. Nicholas, to whom merchants, sailors, travellers, and the citizens of Ghent turned for protection and guidance.
The church was built on the site of an earlier Romanesque place of worship and served as the spiritual center of the merchant community, whose guilds had their trading houses in the immediate vicinity. During the Reformation and the wars that followed, the building was damaged several times, and in the 19th century it underwent an extensive restoration. Today, the church is regarded as an architectural symbol of Ghent's medieval prosperity. After long restoration works that were completed at the beginning of the 21st century, it is once again used for religious services and cultural events. The church is open to visitors and forms part of the city's main tourist routes, while preserving its spiritual and historical significance for the people of Ghent.
Opposite St. Nicholas's church, the guild house of the stonemasons immediately catches the eye. This historic 16th century building once served as the seat of the Stonemasons Guild, an important medieval craft organization responsible for the city's construction and stone architecture. It is one of the few old guild houses that has survived in an almost original state. Particularly striking is the stepped gable, adorned with figures of dancing people, meant to symbolize the joy of craftsmanship and professional mastery. Beneath the building, an underground section dating back to the 13th century has been preserved, further enhancing its historical value. While the historic facade has been retained, the interior and street level now house a modern restaurant.
With its western side, St. Nicholas's Church opens onto the Korenmarkt in the center of Ghent. It is an impressive architectural ensemble, surrounded by picturesque buildings that reflect the city's centuries-old history. Since the 11th century, the Korenmarkt has served as the center of the grain trade and still preserves the spirit of the Middle Ages in its stone architecture. The historic merchants' houses and guild buildings, with their distinctive facades, once belonged to traders and craftsmen. Today, they house cafes, restaurants, and shops, but the facades themselves continue to preserve the architectural style of the 14th and 15th centuries.
One of the most beautiful and significant historic buildings on the Korenmarkt in Ghent is the former main post office. The building was constructed at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, a period when Ghent was developing dynamically and preparing for the 1913 World's Fair. It stood at an important transport hub at the city entrance, where the first mail coaches, wagons, and later trams once stopped. The building is designed in an eclectic style, dominated by neo-Gothic motifs and elements of the Neo-Renaissance. This gives the architecture a rich and expressive character, and deliberately references the historical forms of the region. The sculptural decoration includes around 100 statues, coats of arms, and reliefs. The facade features figures personifying Belgium, Flanders, and Wallonia, as well as sculptures symbolizing the 5 continents and the 9 Belgian provinces.
The tall clock tower, one of the building's most striking architectural features, reaches a height of about 52 meters and stands out clearly in Ghent's skyline, even alongside landmarks such as St. Nicholas's Church or the Belfry. After nearly a century of serving as the city's postal center, the building was taken out of operation in 2001. Today, it has preserved its historic character while gaining a new life. The lower floors house the shopping center, De Post, with shops, cafes, and restaurants. The upper floors are home to the boutique hotel 1898, The Post, where guests can stay right in the heart of Ghent's historic Old Town
enjoying views of the towers and rooftops of the city centre.
St. Michael's Bridge is a stone arch bridge spanning the River Leie in Ghent's historic centre. It was built between 1905 and 1909, according to the designs of the renowned Belgian architect Louis Cloquet, the same architect who also designed the famous former main post office nearby. At the centre of the bridge stands a decorative bronze statue of the Archangel Michael, in armour with raised sword defeating the dragon, a symbolic scene from biblical tradition representing the triumph of good over evil.
One of the main reasons why St. Michael's Bridge is a must-see for visitors is its unique panoramic view of historic Ghent. From the bridge, all three of the city's principal towers can be seen in a single vista: the Church of St. Nicholas, the Ghent Belfry, and St. Bavo's Cathedral. This perspective makes the spot especially popular with photographers. Below, along the River Leie, lie the historic quays of Graslei and Korenlei, lined with the facades of medieval merchants' houses, another breathtaking sight, particularly when the buildings are reflected in the water. Just beyond the bridge stands St. Michael's Church, from which the bridge takes its name.
St. Michael's Church is one of the most majestic and well-known churches in Ghent. It is located in the heart of the city, on the banks of the River Leie. This Roman Catholic church was built in the late Gothic style and is renowned for its richly furnished interior. As early as the 11th century, a small chapel dedicated to the Archangel Michael stood on the site of the present building. The Archangel Michael is regarded as one of the highest-ranking angels and the foremost warrior against evil, the conqueror of the devil. He is most often depicted in armor, with a sword or spear striking down the serpent, Satan. His sculpture can be seen above the church's entrance portal.
Construction of the present church began in 1440 in the late Gothic style and, interrupted by long pauses, extended over more than 2 centuries. The most striking feature of St. Michael's Church is its truncated tower. According to a 17th century design, it was intended to become the tallest tower in the city, reaching a height of 134 meters as a symbol of the triumph of Catholicism over Protestantism. However, due to financial difficulties and problems with the foundations, work was halted in 1828. Instead of a spire, the tower was given a flat roof, which gives it its current monumental yet slightly unfinished appearance.
Inside, the church feels solemn and spacious. Its furnishings impress with their beauty and splendor. The interior is characterized by a rich neo-Gothic design, including the altar and pulpit executed in this style. Various 18th century sculptures have been preserved, among them 8 marble statues of saints, as well as a copy of Michelangelo's Madonna of Bruges, made by Rombout Pauwels. The church also houses numerous Baroque paintings by Flemish artists. The most important artistic treasure of the building is the painting Christ on the Cross by Antonis van Dyck, regarded as one of the masterpieces of the great Flemish painter. The magnificent organ from the early 19th century, set in a neo-Gothic case, is still used today for services and musical events.
After visiting St. Michael's Church, we return to the bridge of the same name. From here, one can admire the riverfront promenades of Graslei on the right and Korenlei on the left. Ghent is a city with an extraordinary atmosphere, but Graslei and Korenlei are often considered its very heart and the most photogenic spot. These two quays face each other directly across the River Leie and once served as the city's main commercial gateways. In the Middle Ages, they formed part of the bustling city harbor. Trade in grain, herbs, and other goods passed through here, a history that is still reflected in their names. Graslei means herb quay, while Korenlei means grain quay.
Graslei is the most famous side of the river. This is where the well-known medieval guild houses with their stepped gables stand. Between the 11th and the 18th centuries, grain was unloaded here. In the Middle Ages, Ghent possessed a unique staple right, stapelrecht. Every ship transporting grain along the rivers Leie or Scheldt was required to dock in Ghent and offer 1/4 of its cargo for sale. Het Spijker, a massive grey stone building dating from the 12th century, was a former grain warehouse and a key element of this system. Enormous quantities of grain were stored here, providing the city with wealth and security of supply. It is considered the oldest house in the world with a stepped gable. Today, the building houses a restaurant and bars.
The House of the Guild of Free Boatmen is a true jewel of the Graslei with a rich history. From the mid-16th century until the second half of the 17th century, it belonged to this guild. The model of a river vessel above the entrance points to the profession of its former owners. Built in the Brabantine Gothic style, the building is among the best preserved and oldest structures of Ghent's former harbour and has been listed as a protected monument since 1943. In 2011, the North Sea Port Authority acquired the former guild house, restored it, and opened it to the public. One might say the port returned to its origins. Today, the building is known as the House of the Port. It hosts an exhibition on the activities of the North Sea Port, and guided tours of the building are offered on Saturday afternoons.
Korenlei lies on the opposite side of the river. From here, you get the best view of the facades along Graslei. The buildings on Korenlei are more stylistically diverse, ranging from medieval Gothic and Baroque to neoclassicism. The Marriott Hotel is a good example of how modern design can be hidden behind a historic facade adorned with swans. The swans on the facade look in different directions. In the past, this signaled that the establishment offered not only drinks, but also services of love. Had the swans been facing one another, it would have indicated a respectable hotel instead.
In fine weather, the quays turned into a large, open-air relaxation area. Students, tourists, and locals sit directly on the stone embankments, drink Belgian beer, and chat. Walking through these streets feels like a journey into the past. Old cobblestones, reflections of historic facades in the river, passing boats, and cozy cafes and restaurants create a truly special atmosphere. The riverbanks are also home to the departure points for sightseeing boats that cruise along Ghent's rivers and canals.
From Korenlei, we make our way toward Gravensteen Castle. Our route takes us through historic lanes and across bridges in one of the city's oldest and most picturesque districts. Here you'll find many cafes, restaurants, bars, art galleries, and small shops that blend harmoniously into the historic setting. The area is especially pleasant to explore on foot. There is no car traffic, and the atmosphere invites leisurely strolls, romantic dinners, and architectural discovery. This quarter originated in the Middle Ages, and its narrow streets and overall layout have changed very little since then, making Stadshal an excellent example of a preserved medieval urban landscape.
Gravensteen, Castle of the Counts, is one of those sites that immediately transports you into the real Middle Ages, without gloss or modern embellishment. It is a stern, powerful fortress standing in the very heart of cozy Ghent. Built in 1180 by Count Philip of Alsace, it is the only medieval castle in Flanders whose defensive system has survived almost completely intact to this day. Unlike many other castles that were constructed to protect against external enemies, Gravensteen was built to keep the city's own citizens in check. At the time, the people of Ghent were wealthy, self-confident, and frequently challenged the authority of the Count. The castle's massive walls served as a constant reminder of who truly held power. For several centuries, the fortress functioned as a residence of the Counts of Flanders. Later, Gravensteen was also used as a mint, a court of justice, a prison, and even a textile factory.
The castle is exceptionally well preserved, and a tour of Gravensteen is a genuine immersion in history. Perhaps the most striking part is the torture museum. Since Gravensteen long served as a court and prison, it houses a grim collection of guillotines, racks, and other instruments of historical justice. The armory features an intriguing collection of medieval swords, crossbows, and chainmail. Visitors can also climb the walls. From the ramparts, a beautiful panoramic view opens up over Ghent's towers and canals. The castle's setting is especially picturesque, standing right on the water.
Directly opposite the main entrance to Gravensteen Castle lies one of the city's oldest and most atmospheric squares, Sint-Veerle Square. The most striking building on the square is the Old Fish Market. It is easily recognized by its monumental Baroque portal, decorated with statues of Neptune and two allegorical figures symbolizing Ghent's rivers, the Scheldt and the Leie. Today, the building houses a tourist information office and a restaurant, but its facade still recalls the site's commercial past. At the center of the square rises a tall column erected for the 1913 World's Fair. Perched proudly atop it sits a lion, the symbol of Flanders.
If you are on the square in the evening, pay attention to the street lamps. They have a special feature. Sometimes they begin to pulse slowly. This is not a malfunction, but an art project entitled To Those Born Today. The lamps are connected to the maternity ward of the city hospital. Each time a child is born in Ghent, the parents press a special button, and the lights on Sint-Veerleplein begin to glow and pulse, announcing new life to the city.
Dear friends, this is where our tour of fairy tale Ghent comes to an end. To reach Sint-Pieters station, we board tramline 2 near Gravensteen Castle in the direction of Mammelokker and ride for about 12 minutes to the 5 Winds Gate stop. There, we change to bus line 55, heading towards Sint-Pieters station, and travel for another 12 minutes. Have a good trip and see you next time.